today I think is going to be a little bit of a cleanup operation for this chat bot that we've been building. What I'm going to do is I don't have a chat window open, so it's going to launch chat browser to a little window so I can keep my eye on the chat. Not too many windows open at once, everywhere. Right, got the IRC chat open now as well. I can keep my eye on that a lot easier. As usual, Fritz is streaming right now, so he's taking any of my traffic, I guess. Not that I get much traffic. I'm not sure if there's anybody actually in chat. Oh, there's a couple of people in it. Like, hi Alex, Headley 8, Beast Boy Saw, and Commander Root. Hi there. Yeah, the IRC chat's a bit slow to get the updates, so. Oh, hi Fraggle Rock 2. Welcome aboard. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a clean-up operation. We've been developing this chatbot. What we'll do is we'll run the chatbot just to show how far we've got so far. So Fible's gone. It should be done now. So if we launch our debug window, we should get an instance of VSCode. So we get a little tiny type. Ooh. Get rid of these breakpoints. And get our extension host window up. So now in chat, if we do bang hover 620 is there. We now get the results of whatever's under line 6 column 20, which was this TypeScript definition in this window. So it's kind of not ideal. We could do with stripping out the markdown and refining it slightly, but I'm finding that at this point the code's getting a bit not messy as such, just needing a bit of refinement. So we're going to do a little bit of cleanup on this today. Not actually adding any functions into this, I don't think. So there's another example. You could get this line. The lines and columns are off by 1, so this would be line 14.8 or so. So if we do bang hover 14.8, we get our TypeScript let disposable VSCode disposable, which is this one here. That's kind of cool. It's a kind of interaction between what I'm working on and the chatbot window. I could see that there could be a lot of cool things which you could integrate into VSCode to make this quite interactive and maybe use it beyond the scope of Twitch streaming as well. So the parts that we want to clean up, I'll just kill us off for now because rid of the split window, and we'll probably make this full screen. And if we look through some of this, most of it's kind of alright. Execute hover. There's nothing really that stands out there, although the API that we've created with the TypeScript bindings isn't amazing. These wrapping the arguments into a resize array is a bit of a pain, but I want to kind of keep the API quite close to what the TypeScript bindings generate. For no other reason than just to make it easy to update later. We might actually publish these VSCode bindings because there's I think the npm mod, the NuGet package that's available right now is quite old. It's about 2 years old, so it might be worth boxing this up and shipping it out as a NuGet package so that people can use these TypeScript bindings. But obviously some of this stuff might need cleaning up, so resize array option obj isn't exactly that nice of an API. So we could clean it up that at a later point. We don't actually need these comments, so we can rip those out for now. This is a little unwieldy. The environment thing, I put that in as a quick hack. So it's just an fsharp file with my O off and chat client details. So we could replace that with .env and load environmental variables from a .env file into the process so that we can actually access the process for environmental variables. That would be one way we could clean this up slightly. I'll probably get to that quite soon. The other part where we could clean things up quite a lot is this pyramid of doom we've got forming here. So you can see we've got a promise, and inside the promise we've got some hovers, some hover, some contents, and then the union cases. So we could collapse 3 option bindings down into one. So what we can do for that, we can actually use the maybe computation expression, which we can start to build out. So for that, we'll start building that right now, just to kind of have a look to see what's needed for this implementation and to see how we can collapse it. So we'll create a maybe builder. That's the simplest possible implementation of a type, and I've kind of forgotten what exactly we need for this, so we'll do get the docs for this and we'll show them on the side of the screen. Let's have a look, see what we kind of need for a minimal implementation. Probably just bind. Actually, we'll actually bring up there's a ton of these maybe computation expressions that already exist, so we'll just get one on screen for reference as well. Recreate the maybe. Alright, so this is kind of the minimal we need, and by computation expressions are really a reprogrammable. I mean, firstly, I don't want this stream to be all about building computation expressions. That's not what it's about. If you want to find out more about them, we can just Google computation expression F#. It's really a reprogrammable way of pragmatically binding let and do to things that exhibit monad type effects, where like with an option it's wrapping a value, and the computation expression really lets you extract the value out with like kind of the curly brace syntax, similar to promise, where you've got let bang result, whereas with an option computation expression, rather than getting the result of the promise back here, we would get the result of the option back if there was some value. So that's basically all that we're going to do to clean up this. And what this should allow us to do is when we enter our promise computation expression, we should be able to collapse all of this into a non-pyramid style code. So it's kind of all on the same line. It'll probably be only 4 lines of code. So it should clean it up quite a lot. So what we need is, I'll make this 2/3 of the screen so we can kind of look at this code. So we probably need 2 or 3 members in our option builder. And I'm going to call it a maybe builder because it's easy to type maybe than option. Let's have a think. So we've got member bind. An option and a binder, and then the simplest way to implement this is option.bind. Because there's already a function that exists for this. And that would be I think the right way to get this round, option binder. So we'd have binder, and then actually we call this the value. Makes it easier to envisage. So now given a value which is an option generic, and a binder which is a function which converts from an A to a B option, it returns an option. Kind of a bit to get your head around, but bear with me while we get our other members in place. And then we need a return so that we can exit the computation expression with the return part. And that's got a value, use value there as well. There's various other things we can do, like combining, which allows us to do things like while, try with, and try finally, but I kind of want a very simple implementation. I don't think we'll need to do while blocks or for blocks. You know, a for block would require a while member as well. There's also delay, which we will probably need to do the binding. I'm not sure if we need delay. I can't remember what you actually need the delay for, and there's possibly return from, which allows us to bind to another option. So we'll do the first return first, just to get us a bare minimal implementation. So this is basically just acting as a wrapper. If any of you that are following the stream that know anything about applicatives, this is equivalent to kind of like an applicative lift function. I don't really want to start talking about applicatives. So we've got bind, we've got return. We could need something like return from if we've got another function that returns an option. Which is really just returning its value. But that would be typed to something like so given an option, it's just literally just return the option, so it's kind of equivalent to an ID function. I'm not sure what we need that for right now. Be kind of like if we were yielding it, doing like a yield bang operation, I think. I'm very rusty on computation expressions. I don't really define them that often. I kind of just consume them. You only really need async, maybe, and a couple of others. You don't really need to define your own very often. With that in mind, we'll do another item here. Maybe equals maybe builder. So what that should let us do now is, at this point here, we should be able to do maybe hovers this construct may have been used in a computation expression that builder that defines a 0. Okay, so at this point we find out now we need a 0. Luckily, the compiler tells us what it's expecting. If we don't have one of those operations available, it'll tell us we need one. So really only just telling it what happens if it can't bind something, what is the alternative? And in an options case, the alternative to some is none. So kind of in a result builder, your 0 would be the 0 or the error results type, if you're building one of those. So now, I'd like to build that. So we'll put this in the result. So at the moment we've processed this one. Now this would be the next part that we need. At this point we can do a let bang, and our top is our sum operation. So basically binding the maybe down the good path. If we don't completely go down the good path, it returns none. At this point, our code doesn't actually deal with any of the negative paths anyway. It's just it literally just comes back with a unit type. So when we're matching on results, we're only really actually doing a do operation. If there is some in the results, then it actually it does client say environment channel 0 markdown. So our aim of our maybe function is to either return a message or no message. So if there is a message, we're going to do client say. If there isn't, we do nothing. So we're basically getting rid of two elements of this stepped pyramid, which is kind of come down through this code. So we can really just start paring down some of this code. So now we can do this one. Bang top contents. Hover, we haven't got hover. So where's hover? Some hover. Hovers. I got this slightly confused because I haven't followed this exactly. So message results with some hovers. So let top is hovers. Then matching top with some hover equals let top contents. Oh, so I've missed a step. So that's hovers, and then we've got top. So sometimes it can be a struggle understanding these pyramids that form because it gets quite confusing once you've got them nested. Once you review them later, you're kind of like, what am I doing there? Doesn't make sense. So at hovers, we get all the hovers back from our results. Some hovers. You can kind of cheat and get rid of the pyramid of def by moving the code into a different syntax, but that doesn't really help the situation. Just checking the stream's okay. Yeah. I'll add a return none here just to show up the compiler a bit. So what's this complaining about? Unable to bind value. So what's it going on about? Can I comment it out? for now. Why is it complaining about that? So it's moaning that it's not going to work properly. So this is annoying. Let's undo this because I can't remember what I've done. Okay. So what's this complaining about? Incomplete structured content out before. So what's wrong with that? I'm going to reload the VSCode. Incomplete structured. So what's it complaining about that for? Remember? Ah. Alright, that's better. That error throws you off completely because you don't notice that really quickly. Right. So we've got some hovers, some hovers, some hover, some contents. But in between we've also got these option bindings. In addition to that, try head returns an option and sequence try head returns an option. Anyway, okay, I'll maybe block back in because the error kind of threw me for a little bit. Call it something different that's not going to collide. So first of all, our results is an option of hover array. So the first thing I do is results some hovers. Which is some hovers there, and then let top equals hovers try head, and we match hover top. Yeah, I'm confusing myself here. So we get our hovers, and we get back the top hover. So this will binding top. We're matching on top, then we're creating a new binding called hover, and then we use that new binding to get the first element in the sequence. So we actually only need top contents at that point. So hovers, top hover, top contents, which is the first one in the sequence, and then at this point we've got our top contents, and then the markdown is literally going to be this part again. Let me just paste that in here, and we would return markdown. So at this point we've got an option string, which is our markdown, and if we compare that to this part, I know I've changed this a little bit. It kind of simplifies it, so it says we get our hovers back, we get our top hover back, and then we get the contents from the top one, and then we get the markdown by matching on these different cases that come back from the contents, which is a marked string. And a marked string is a union type which has one of 4 different definitions: case 1, 2, 3, and 4. The TypeScript bindings generated the 4 different cases. The case we're most interested in is case 1, which is a markdown string, and I've never actually seen it drop into case 2, 3, or 4, as these would be something to do with the depreciated API. So in some respects we're not really interested in these 3 anyway, so we just convert them to a string, which probably wouldn't be the right representation. So at this point here we've got our markdown. And then really we can copy this and then do something like markdown my indents are a bit weird at the moment. We could do markdown, and we could pipe that into option.iter, which means this would only get iterated if markdown contained sum. We could partially apply the channel to client say, which means that client say gets the environment channels applied to it, so it needs the channel string and then it needs the message. So if markdown contains an option which is sum, it would then call this function, which already has the channels applied, and it would apply the markdown. So at this point we can actually get rid of all of this. Let me check exactly what we're getting rid of first. So we're actually inside the promise block. So we can get rid of everything from here. kind of makes it a lot neater. And if we run this, it should still work. You see there, it's at work. So cleanup operation 1 is now complete. We've added a maybe computation expression to clean up the code. Not sure if anyone in chat followed exactly what I was doing there, but I'm hoping someone actually followed that. It sometimes can be fiddly to refactor stuff like this because you're kind of changing the structure of how it works, but it kind of makes sense when you read through as a sequence of operations. You get the results back, which may or may not be a hover array, and the let bang binds hovers to that option result. And then we get the top element from the hovers array. If there isn't a top element, then it would be none, and the maybe block would return the 0 element. After that, we get the top contents in terms of getting the first element from the sequence. It's a resize array, so we can use sequence on that. And our markdown is really just extracting out the contents of these union cases and returning a markdown. We could probably add a option.run, which would kind of do this part. Let me see if I've got some syntax for that. Not sure if we actually need that anyway, but I mean, this cleans it up quite a bit. I'm still not happy with this MDS value thing, but we can kind of rip these out for now. We're not really that interested in writing this to the console right now because it was just for test. And we can drop the syntax underneath. That kind of cleans up that indentation a bit. So I think you'll agree that kind of cleans that up quite a lot. I mean, either way we could look at this is using applicatives, but I don't really want to go down that route because they're quite tricky to get your head around if you're not used to it. But you can kind of just think of this maybe block as an alternative to async, apart from rather than binding to the result of an asynchronous operation, it's binding to the return of a sum or none operation. So you only actually run the next element in the sequence, or you only bind to the next element in the sequence if the previous result was sum. In this case, we're not doing anything with the bad values, so we only really need to do option iter. How is everyone in chat? Is everybody doing okay today on this fine Sunday? It's actually been quite windy here, but it's the sun's out right now. So Alex Headley 8 says, Kenny. Yeah, it's not bad here. Still quite windy. So I reckon the next thing we could clean up is by possibly using .env. So rather than having this secrets file env.fs, which has my OAuth key in, we can create a .env file. Now, I created one of these earlier on, and it kind of doesn't have any information in, but I kind of created it as a just so it already exists, so we can test this in this stream. These are just the settings that I use as an example in the .env npm package. I'll bring that up on here. So really, .env allows you to inject environment variables from a .env file into the process space of Node, so we can extract them out at runtime and get these parameters which are defined in the env file. So I think the first thing we need to do that is we need to import the Node module. So I reckon about here we could do a let.env object equals JS native, and then we'll add an attribute on the top. This will be an import. .env imports there. Equals. So this will allow us to, I mean, I've added the package here in npm. Where is it? Packages. So in npm I've added the .env package. So it's kind of at the root. The fable splitter kind of imports everything, so it should be available within our split packages in out. So now that we've got .env working, the quickest way we can probably use it without having to create a whole TypeScript binding is we can create a module for this. So we'll have module config, and so basically the way the .env works is it's all injected into process space. So now it's up to us. We can just extract that from the current process if we know the keys. So we'll create a module for config, and then let variable key, which is a string, and it will return a string. So we pass it the key, and it passes back the contents of the value of the key. And so now if we have an emit, you could probably import the process NuGet package, but we don't really want to be messing about too much. So I reckon we can just output this direct. So it's process.env, and it's an array which will pass in the first argument $0. And obviously if this is not got anything inside it, we probably want to return the string. Is that the right syntax? So Enigma 1 says you have to use single quotes rather than, or escape the double quotes, yeah. Of course we haven't put the JS native there. So this should allow us to grab out a process environment variable. And we can test this by, in activation we can do console.log, and then we could try config, can't type, config type variable, and then we'll have a look at one of the ones that I've put in here. I'm not going to fill these live on the stream because I don't want to expose my OAuth token, which I won't contribute to the GitHub repo anyway. But if we do db pass, we should be able to extract that out. Actually, if we put db pass in there as well, db even, and if we run this, we should see that it'll print it on the activation. Hi Tinigmal1, by the way, I didn't see that message on the chat. Welcome aboard to the stream. Did I run that? Let's try running it again. So let's have a look at the out debug console. So we've got db pass. I guess it didn't work. What we do need to do is, as soon as if we'd have read the documentation in this, as early as possible in your application, require and configure.env. So we ain't done that. So probably the first point we can do this is in activation. Strange noise outside. So .env config. I mean, we're using a dynamic interface here because we can. I'd probably rather have a typed version of this, but this is going to suffice. I reckon if we run that, it might work now. So here we go. In our debug console, we've got dbpass, and then we've got the simple password that was actually in the env file, which is, where has it gone? There we go. So that would be something that we could use going forward rather than this really noddy environmental file which I've got here, which I won't click on because it's got my off key for the chatbot in. So that would clean that up a bit. So it kind of makes it more nicer to use. In terms of cleaning anything else up, I'm kind of quite happy with that. I don't like these two empty matches here. So, I mean, these substring 6, we could probably put some regex in to, if we wanted to sit and create regex expressions on the stream, which I don't want to do. I don't particularly enjoy regex, and it takes me a while to get it right. So these are kind of fail-safe because elements won't bind to this unless there's 2 items in the array. So it will actually drop down to this and not print anything. And the last wildcard that we've got is if it wasn't a hover command. So if it's not a hover command, we don't really care. What we could do is we could actually experiment, and we could actually create an active pattern just for the hover command. So we could call it let hover . Oh god, someone's just started up a chainsaw outside. I'm just going to mute my audio for a bit. That's turned off now. Someone's doing something outside. That's really annoying. So we've got an input. So we'll create an active pattern called hover with an input. And then we will do, we'll copy this functionality here. So we'll match input substring to hover. And if that's the case, we will return some input. Let's see what we do after this. Trimmed message substring 6. Actually, we'll return the trimmed message. And if it's not hover, we'll simply return none. The input is a string. So what this does is it creates an active pattern called hover, and it's a partially active pattern, which means that if the input case matches, it returns some of your chosen output, and if it doesn't, it returns none. So what we can do now is we can replace this match hover with match this with hover elements. spelling right. And then we switch that from elements to trimmed message. And that kind of cleans that up slightly. Yeah, to ignore one active pattern. It kind of works quite nice because then we can decide that this active pattern is actually returning the option string, which is just a substring, but we could actually put this part in there as well. So if it is hover, then we return input substring 6. Into sum. So that means we can get rid of this part because our elements are the elements that we split. So at this point we're getting back a hover command, and it might have various elements. If there is 2 elements, we're going to assume it's a line and a column. We could put this detection up in here so we can create like a proper hover command, which we could probably do in the future if we get like a more complex hover command. But for now, that kind of, it feels like this cleans it up quite nicely because we're actually matching just a hover command. And if it is a hover command, which we deemed by it starting with bang hover and it having some elements after it, or possibly some elements after it, we'd have to do a check on that if there was 2 elements back. Should we do that now? Actually, we can. If we put all the command's logic for detecting whether it's valid inside the hover active pattern, it'll kind of reduce some of this as well. And Enigma1 says, can you match now to hover line column? That's interesting. You probably can. So that kind of cleans it up a little bit more. It's not as thorough as actually passing out the line and column from the hover command, but it kind of lets us reduce this a little. So that would let us, which block is this? Hover. Trying to see which one that ties with. It's like an extra case, I think. Where on earth was this for? I think that's an extra case. We can grab this and de-indent it. So we've still kind of got this pyramid here, but it's a lot less than what it was before. So is it my candles? Maybe you can make and hover data with each element. Yeah, that if we create a record type with that in, it would clean it up a little. I'll actually drop this closing bracket up here as well. Get rid of these line feeds. So we'll just check this still actually works. So one of the important things of writing F# is making sure you clean up after a session of experimentation. And I think I've broken it. Yeah. See, we should have had some unit tests. Right, let's see where we might have broken it. What I'll do is we'll wind back a bit till we get rid of the elements. And we'll recheck at this point. Ah, so it's still broken at this point. I can't see anything obvious that we've mangled as part of this. Add a little log here to see if we actually get this far. Just check. Just check watch is still working properly. Right, so if you run this now, see what happens. See if we actually get that line in the active pattern hitting in the log window. So it's actually getting to the hover active pattern. Input not 6 with hover. Input substring 6. Okay, so let's split this up. Call it let subs equals split. Split by space, remove empty entries, and then we'll return some subs. But before we do, we will log them out. Try that, see what happens. So there's nothing left at that point. Import substring 6. So we... So Mike Kendall says, what if you save that substring before, that binding before not repeating that substring? The problem is we're matching the message substring not 6. And this is never going to get anything because it's only going to get past a substring of 6. So that's the bug. We just match the message with hover elements. That's the problem with the refactoring. I'm refactoring the entire function, but kind of not taking any notice of the kind of prefix part of the function. We kind of refactored that, but didn't refactor our original function to take that into account. So now if we run it, it should work. Trademark. Cool, we're working again. So we found the bug. If we had a test, we'd have found it a bit earlier, but we would start to scratch our head and fiddle about through this. So now this is a little bit more resilient, because now we can change the hover command by tweaking this hover active pattern. And then we can also add any further commands to this chatbot as well. So we could, I can't think any offhand, but we could create different patterns. So I think that's quite cool. I mean, it would be nicer if this didn't just return a string array, it actually returned us a line and a column. So actually we'll put that in right now. Can we actually return back? If we grab this part, I'll put that back up this line. So we've got our subs. We won't bother logging this stuff now because we don't need to. So we'll match out subs with a line and a column. If it is a line and a column, we can return some line column. And if it's not, we'll simply return none. So this part, we can match hover elements, which is line column. So my candle says float them before. Float them. Ah, yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, we can do that as well. Do one bit at a time though, so we don't get too far broken. I like to do one step, make sure it's all compiling, and then do the next step. I think that's okay. Have a look at our watch window. Let's make sure that compiles. Yep. So at the moment we're getting back as 2 strings, but if we float them here, like you said, so one thing I tend to do is get a bit ahead of myself and start refactoring a lot of stuff, and you get to a point where you're like, oh, it doesn't work, and then you can't remember what you've done, and you have to rewind a whole chunk of stuff, and you've got to be really careful keeping yourself in tow. So now we can get rid of these 2 line floats. We're kind of switching line for line, moving them up into command, but we're kind of also getting things dealing with each area of responsibility. So now when we come back, hover gives us everything we need to continue. We've got a float line and a float column. And float line are all only ever used in execute line column. So this is quite succinct. We get our substrings. We could dump that straight into, let me check. Making those remove line 89. Where's 89? Okay. Which is, I mean, yeah, there's no, what's this wildcard for? I think it's just acting as two wildcards. So this is kind of like doing this now. Let's run this. Check everything's tickety-boo. Yeah, it looks like it's working still. So that's quite cool. What we can also do at a later point, I don't want to do it in this stream, is that when we execute the hover, we can have need a markdown cleanup function, so that we can kind of strip this, the markdown prefix and language, and the trailing markdown. It's a pity the IRC chat doesn't support markdown. Otherwise, it'd be nice if it presented that in the window. So what else could we do with this? We've got our promise block, which is here to there. Got promise run and ignore. You can actually de-indent that one. So we're kind of smoothing the curve of the pyramid of doom. That's kind of quite nice compared to what we had before. So I think so Enigma 1 says extract the promise into a function. We could do, but let's have a look at that. And it'd literally be just putting, we could actually tweak execute hover to be a bit different. I mean, execute hover already does a promise. So Enigma 1 says, one question, is it annoying if we write questions, or is it something you want to have? I'm quite open to questions and people questioning what I'm doing, because sometimes I'll stop talking about something and I'll be concentrating on the stream, but I'll kind of lose track of whether what I'm doing is understandable. So I'm quite happy to have question what I'm doing, because sometimes I'll go off on a tangent doing something where it's obvious I'm doing it wrong, but I've kind of I've lost the context of what I was doing. So I'm quite happy with questions. I was trying to think if at this point would I refactor that promise. So we've matched the message to be hover. We'll create a promise. So execute hover, then say onto the channel. I mean, say isn't async. Promise run. So execute hover really just executes the command and returns the result. So it's kind of like a succinct piece of code, execute hover. Of course, if we refactor this, yeah, I was going to say that one of the hardest things will be figuring out what to call it. Try get hover markdown. So Tigmol1 says, I personally don't like big match cases because you have to scroll to see all the matches. How is your factor into a function if it's longer than a few lines? With fsharp, it varies, to be honest. You often see matches which are half a page to a full screen. I mean, this is supermassive text. I'd probably have my text that big, so it kind of looks like a handful of lines of code. But when you're streaming, it looks a lot bigger than it is. I probably would refactor it. I'm just trying to think of how best to do it with this having a promise, this returning a promise. It kind of feels a bit messy still. But we can try and we'll create another function up here. So hover would get us our data. Execute hover. We'll try it just for size, see what it's like. Try get hover markdown needs a line and a column. So we've got execute hover. Its indents drifted out. So at this point we need the client. But we could just pass in a line, a column, and a function. Call it f. Call it save function just to be clear what it does, because we don't use single letters. That's pretty awful. My kind of says I was thinking that method with the maybe part. The method with just oh, okay. Okay, well, do that first, just for. I mean, it's 6 and 2.3s. It's possibly far too early to refactor too much because we don't know what other types of commands we might have and what it might look like, or if we need a different architecture to create these around. value. It doesn't know what MDS is. So try get hover markdown. So it takes a option ref array. That's quite nasty. So results would be something array, string array. I've forgotten what I was doing. Results was option hover array. String array option string. I'm confused about what I was wanting. An option hover array option. So now, this is probably a better way to go because it's a smaller fragment and it does what it says on the tin. It gets past a hover array option and it returns you a markdown option. So because that let bang on results. Let bang hovers equals results. Yeah, the result is an option hover array. Hovers end up being a hover array because the let bang binds the option to hovers. So try get hover markdown. I'll shove this in here now. So that's quite succinct. So we've got our hover command. The promise is it's still a bit annoying. Now even can change functions. I probably wouldn't use function chaining. I tend not to use it because I think it's a refactoring too far. It can often result in code which, given a few weeks, you can no longer easily untangle it. So we've got our results, and we try to get our hover markdown, and then if there is one, we iterate them and save them into the client. So I think all in all, the stream's been fairly successful. We've refactored, got rid of a lot of junk, and our on message function is now 10 lines of code, and we've got lots of stuff cleaned up. We've got an active pattern, so they're always nice to get into some F-sharp streams, because a lot of people still don't use active patterns or quite know how to use them or how to apply them. We've got rid of our pyramid of death. We've instead got a nice succinct try-get markdown. Our execute hovers are stayed the same. We've also integrated the .env thing, so we can get rid of this junk in the envfs file, which is a horrible hard-coded stuff for the OAuth. And we've got a tiny little maybe builder which allows us to do the let bang. One thing I've noticed, we're getting a ping timeout on the chatbot client, and that's probably because we haven't implemented a ping pong function or something, or that's something to look into later anyway. So unless we've got any questions about what we've done today or any other things, I might call this stream a day, and I'm desperately in need of another cup of tea. I think it looks like it's done. Let's have a look. Substring 6, hover, subs, line column. We could probably make this into something a bit more structured, but what if the client say part was put after the match message? I'm not sure what you mean by that. What if the client say part was put after the match message? It seems like you're trying to do two things at the same time. Well, we get our message here, and if it comes back, we just iterate the option. We can do it as two parts, but get hover results and send to the client. Maybe there are in the future new commands. I was hoping there'd be some more commands in the future, because the hover command is like kind of quite simple, but you might want to say dependencies, bang dependencies, and then it would tell you all of the npm dependencies in the project, or all the NuGet packages used, or something like that. Or you could say project structure, and you could get back the tree structure for the project. It's like, kind of like an ASCII diagram. There could be loads and loads of different things you could do to bring back this stuff. Or I'm not sure I'll be doing a lot more on the chatbot after this cleanup, because there's some other cool projects I want to look through. There's the Myriad project, which is the F-sharp compiler code generation stuff I've been doing. I want to feature that on the channel. I also want to do some game programming stuff to kind of expand the platform game series that started on YouTube, kind of do that as a live stream. And then also there's a CPU emulator projects I want to kind of start to do. So there's a tons of stuff I want to do, but like the chatbot stuff seemed like a really an interesting start. I'm going to say this is the end of the stream, and we'll continue on next time with either adding more commands to the chatbot, or we'll start up one of the other projects. I'm kind of tempted to say we'll start with the AST generation with Myriad. It could be another cool project to get stuck into. But just like I say, thanks for tuning in to the stream, and I will see you all in the next stream. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.